It's crazy, man. This thing tried to bite me this morning. I was feeding the bottle.
New footage just pushed NBA YoungBoy into the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. A viral post started racing across social media, claiming his white tiger had to be rescued with help from a zookeeper, and people online were saying the animal was being treated terribly.
He was abusing her horribly, and the authorities saw it because it was posted on social media.
The timeline exploded almost instantly, clips spread everywhere, and the second rumors popped up that authorities might have stepped in, the whole situation started spinning out of control. Suddenly, everybody was talking about YoungBoy and that tiger again. Now rewind back to 2017. NBA. YoungBoy was only about 18 years old, but his name was already ringing heavy in the rap world. His music was blowing up, tracks were climbing fast, and his buzz was spreading through neighborhoods all across the country. Right in the middle of that momentum, he made a wild move that shocked a lot of people. YoungBoy ended up getting a white tiger cub. And just to be clear, this was not some regular house pet. This was not a fluffy little cat from a pet shop. This was a real white tiger cub, breathing and growing, and it was sitting inside a regular house around the New Orleans area in Louisiana. The female tiger cub was reportedly living there like it was just another guard dog in the yard. Around the same time his music career was taking off, YoungBoy started posting clips of the animal online. He wasn't hiding it either. The tiger was all over his Instagram for everyone to see. YoungBoy was even recording himself sitting on the couch with the white tiger cub. In the clips, he's bottle feeding it, scratching under its chin, and handling it like it was just another flashy thing he picked up during a random shopping spree. It almost looked like he was treating the tiger the same way someone might show off new jewelry or a brand new car. And this wasn't just talk either. There was real footage floating all over the internet. One video in particular started getting passed around everywhere. In it, YoungBoy is chilling with a small white tiger cub, holding the bottle up while the animal drinks, playing with it like the whole moment was completely normal. But then the moment turned tense. During the same clip, the tiger suddenly snapped and bit at him a couple of times while he was trying to feed it.
Say, I ain't lying, bro. They really put me on Fader, like, or the Fader magazine. That means so much to me, son.
In the video, YoungBoy was also talking about a bunch of things at once. He sounded excited about landing on the cover of Fader magazine, which was a huge moment for him during his early rise in music. That kind of spotlight meant a lot for a young artist coming up. But right in the middle of celebrating that big win, he casually mentioned the whole tiger situation.
It's crazy, man. This thing tried to bite me this morning. I was feeding the bottle.
So right there on camera, YoungBoy straight up tells everyone that the tiger tried to bite him earlier that same morning while he was feeding it from the bottle. And the wild part is his reaction barely changed at all. He brushed it off like someone just told him his takeout order was running a few minutes late. There was almost no concern in his voice. He mentioned the bite, laughed it off, and kept the conversation moving like nothing serious even happened.
She did, though. But hey, though, thank you. Thank you to everybody who was a part of the Fader magazine.
The tiger cub had just snapped at him during breakfast, and to him it sounded like just another random moment in the day. He even said she bit him, acknowledged it quickly, and then immediately switched the topic back to celebrating his Fader magazine cover. Like getting nipped by a tiger cub before lunch was just normal life for him. That was the energy he had about the whole situation. But here's where things started turning serious. Those same videos he posted online ended up becoming the exact reason the situation collapsed around him. Because when an 18-year-old rapper is going viral non-stop and posting clips with a rare animal he didn't have legal permission to keep, that attention starts bringing the wrong kind of spotlight. Every post basically laid everything out in public. The video showed the animal, showed the house, and showed how the tiger was being kept. It was all right there for the world to see. Eventually authorities stepped in. The Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries later seized the white tiger cub, which was about 5 months old at the time, from a private residence in the New Orleans area that reportedly didn't have the proper permits for keeping that kind of animal. According to official records, the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries showed up at a private residence and discovered the white tiger cub living there. The animal was around 5 months old at the time, and authorities immediately stepped in and confiscated it. The reason was pretty simple under Louisiana law. If someone wants to keep a tiger, they need the proper permit and authorization. Without that paperwork, it's not allowed. And in this situation, there reportedly wasn't any permit on file. No commercial license, no exotic animal permit connected to that address, nothing in the system showing legal approval for a tiger to be living in a regular residential neighborhood. So, from the state's perspective, the entire setup was off the books. No documents, no official authorization, no legal clearance for someone to keep a tiger at that location. Because of that, authorities stepped in and removed the animal. But the permit issue turned out to be only part of the bigger problem. Once the cub was taken and examined by trained veterinarians, the condition of the animal raised even more concern. When professionals finally looked over the tiger properly, they reportedly discovered the cub was in very poor health. Underneath all the social media videos and online attention, the animal appeared to be struggling physically. Veterinary reports described the cub as severely malnourished and extremely weak. The tiger was dehydrated, noticeably underweight, and also dealing with ringworm along with a heavy parasite infestation. The overall condition suggested the animal needed immediate professional care. Let's go through that list again because every single detail matters here. Reports said the cub was malnourished, meaning it wasn't getting enough food or it wasn't receiving the proper nutrition a young tiger needs to grow. Then there was lethargy, which means the cub appeared extremely low on energy. Instead of being active like a normal young animal, it was moving slowly and struggling to stay lively throughout the day. Veterinarians also described the cub as emaciated. That means its body weight had dropped far below where it should have been, to the point where parts of its bones were becoming visible. On top of that, the tiger was reportedly dehydrated, meaning it wasn't getting enough water either. The health problems didn't stop there. The cub was also dealing with ringworm, a fungal infection that spreads across the skin and can cause irritation and hair loss. And even worse, veterinarians found a serious parasite infestation affecting the animal, according to reports. The infestation had become so severe that the cub had lost the fur around parts of its face. For such a young tiger, that kind of condition signals a serious health crisis. Veterinarians explained that problems like that don't develop overnight. It usually takes an extended period without proper medical care, nutrition, and safe living conditions for issues to reach that level. There were also concerns about the cub's paws. Reports said the pads were worn down and irritated, which can happen when a young tiger spends long periods walking on hard surfaces like concrete. Normally, tiger cubs are supposed to grow up in environments that are much softer and closer to their natural habitat. Tiger cubs are still developing when they're that young. Their paw pads are soft, sensitive, and not built for rough surfaces yet. When a cub spends too much time walking on hard cement instead of natural ground, those pads can get badly worn down. The constant pressure from concrete can leave the pads cracked, raw, and irritated, which causes real pain for the animal. And according to veterinary reports, that's exactly what professionals found when they examined this cub after it was rescued. By that point, the full picture had started to come together. Authorities were dealing with a white tiger cub that was reportedly being kept without the legal permit required under state law. On top of that, veterinarians documented serious health problems. The cub was underweight, dehydrated, and suffering from parasites. Parts of the fur around its face had fallen out, and the paw pads showed damage consistent with long periods on hard flooring. Altogether, the animal clearly needed immediate care, and while all this was happening, the tiger had previously been appearing in social media posts where it was being shown to millions of followers online. The situation quickly shifted from viral attention to a full rescue effort once authorities stepped in. After the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries removed the cub, the focus turned completely toward rehabilitation. Experts understood that fixing the damage wouldn't be quick or simple. The young tiger required consistent veterinary treatment, proper nutrition, and a controlled environment designed for exotic wildlife. It was a serious medical recovery process that required trained specialists, the right facility, and a lot of time to help the cub heal properly. After the rescue, the tiger cub was first taken to the Audubon Nature Institute's Animal Hospital in Louisiana. That's where the initial treatment started. The facility, based in New Orleans, is known for handling wildlife and exotic animals that need serious medical attention. The team there had the veterinarians, equipment, and experience needed to deal with animals in rough condition, and this cub clearly needed that level of care. Each medical issue had to be treated carefully, and at the same time, the parasite infestation alone required its own treatment plan. Then there was the malnutrition, which meant the cub needed a controlled feeding program to safely rebuild its strength. On top of that, the veterinarians had to treat dehydration, manage the ringworm infection, and help the damaged paw pads begin to heal. Every one of those problems affected the cub's overall health, so the recovery plan had to address everything together. But the Audubon Nature Institute was never meant to be the tiger's permanent home. That facility handled the emergency side of things, stabilizing the animal and getting it through the most critical stage of recovery. The long-term plan was to move the cub somewhere that focuses on caring for rescued big cats full-time, a place designed to give animals like this a safe environment after they've been removed from difficult situations. That next stop ended up being a sanctuary called Lions, Tigers, and Bears. The sanctuary was Lions, Tigers, and Bears, an accredited exotic animal rescue located out in Alpine, California. On December 22, 2017, the young tiger cub was officially transferred there, making a long trip from Louisiana all the way across the country to California. That journey marked a huge change for the cub. She had gone from living inside a residential home in the New Orleans area, where authorities said she was being kept without proper permits, to arriving at a professional sanctuary built specifically for rescued big cats. Once she arrived, the team at the sanctuary gave her a name. They called her Nola, a nod to New Orleans, where she had originally been found. Staff members at Lions, Tigers, and Bears have spoken openly over the years about what Nola looked like when she first arrived and how serious her recovery process was going to be. According to the sanctuary's founder and director, Bobby Brink, the young tiger needed extensive care when she first reached the facility. Brink has discussed Nola's condition publicly several times, explaining that the cub had clearly been struggling with multiple health problems. The parasite infestation had damaged parts of her coat, leaving areas where fur had fallen out. The malnutrition had also taken a toll on her body. At that age, tiger cubs are supposed to be growing quickly, but Nola was reportedly far under the healthy weight expected for a cub her size. There were also lasting concerns with her paws. Spending long periods on hard flooring earlier in her life had left her paw pads irritated and damaged while they were still developing. Altogether, the sanctuary team said the cub's condition showed that she needed long-term care, steady nutrition, and a carefully managed environment so her body could slowly recover and regain strength. And here's the part that really frustrates the people who run animal sanctuaries like Lions, Tigers, and Bears. According to rescue staff, they see situations like this happen again and again. Someone with money and a big public profile decides they want an exotic animal because it looks impressive online. A tiger cub, a lion cub, or another rare animal suddenly becomes the next thing to show off on social media. For a moment, it creates viral content and attention. The pictures look wild, the videos get millions of views, and people online react to the shock of seeing a huge animal sitting in someone's living room. But behind the camera, caring for an exotic animal is extremely complicated. Big cats require specialized diets, constant veterinary care, large natural spaces, and trained professionals who understand their behavior and medical needs. Sanctuary teams often say the problem starts when someone gets one of these animals without fully understanding that responsibility. The animal ends up needing care that most private homes simply aren't equipped to provide. That's the bigger issue people point to when they talk about Nola's story. Her case became one example in a much larger conversation about exotic animals being kept in environments that aren't designed for their long-term health and safety. Stories like this are not rare situations. According to many wildlife rescue groups, it's part of a larger pattern where wealthy individuals or public figures end up buying exotic animals they are not prepared to care for. The animals often become the ones dealing with the consequences of those decisions. Caring for big cats requires specialized knowledge, huge spaces, and constant veterinary support, which is why many sanctuaries speak out about these situations. But in Nola's case, there was at least one positive outcome. Despite everything she went through early on, the young tiger was able to recover once she arrived at the sanctuary. The team at Lions, Tigers, and Bears placed her on a proper nutrition program, gave her consistent veterinary treatment, and moved her into an environment designed for big cats. Over time, the improvements started to show. The parasites were treated, her fur gradually grew back, and her weight slowly returned to a healthy level. Even the damaged paw pads improved as much as possible with proper care. Little by little, Nola transformed from a weak and struggling cub into a strong adult white tiger. Today, she lives in a large natural-style enclosure at one of the most respected exotic animal sanctuaries in the country. Recent updates from Lions, Tigers, and Bears show Nola looking healthy and active. She now has space to roam, proper meals on a regular schedule, and experienced caretakers monitoring her health. She also has the chance to live near other big cats at the sanctuary, giving her a more natural environment than what she experienced early in life. For a tiger that went through such a difficult start, that recovery is a huge turnaround. At the sanctuary, Nola finally had everything she needed: proper food, trained caretakers, veterinary support, and a safe environment designed for a big cat. All the things that reportedly weren't in place earlier when she had been kept inside a residential property in Louisiana without the required permits or long-term plan, and that contrast really became the heart of the entire story. On one side, you had a young tiger struggling in a private home, and on the other side, you had a professional sanctuary built to handle animals like this the right way. But the story didn't completely end with Nola's recovery. Years later, the situation popped back into public conversation again in a way that surprised a lot of people, because another major name in hip-hop suddenly became part of the story. Rick Ross. Rick Ross owns a massive property in Georgia that he famously calls the Promised Land. The estate is enormous, stretching across hundreds of acres with wide open space and different animals roaming around the grounds. The property is so large that people often describe it as feeling like its own small town. Ross has shown parts of the estate online many times, and it's known for being one of the most talked about celebrity properties in hip-hop. According to Ross himself, there was a period when NBA YoungBoy's Tiger was actually staying on that property. And the way that situation reportedly happened adds another unexpected twist to the whole story.
Meek Mill brought NBA YoungBoy over to the Promised Land one night.
The connection started through Meek Mill, who has a long history with Rick Ross through the Maybach music group circle. At one point, Meek brought YoungBoy out to the Promised Land for a visit. It was supposed to be just a casual stop at the estate, but somehow during that visit, or shortly after it, the tiger ended up remaining at the property instead of leaving with YoungBoy.
NBA YoungBoy had a small cat. I'm not sure what the...
Rick Ross once talked about the moment the animal first appeared at his property, and the way he described it was interesting. At first he said it looked like a small cat, almost like he hadn't fully realized what he was actually dealing with when it showed up. That detail says a lot about the early stage of the situation. When the tiger first arrived at the Promised Land, it was still young enough that it didn't immediately look dangerous. From a distance, it probably seemed small, calm, and easy to manage. It was still in that stage where big cat cubs can appear cute and harmless, the kind of stage where people might think it's just another unusual pet hanging around the property.
It felt like a little tiger, okay?
But then Ross made it clear what the animal actually was. Not a house cat, not a bobcat, not some rare domestic breed. It was a tiger, a young one at the time, sure, but still a tiger with all the instincts and power that come with that. And somehow, through a series of events that even Rick Ross himself later admitted were a bit unclear, the tiger ended up staying at his massive Georgia estate for a while.
Some kind of way, it ended up at the Promised Land.
At first, everything seemed calm. Ross even said he liked having the tiger around, and the animal appeared comfortable in that environment. For a short time, the whole situation looked like it might actually work. A young tiger living on a huge estate with acres of land all around it didn't immediately sound like a disaster waiting to happen.
I liked the tiger liked me. It's NBA YoungBoy's Tiger.
But this is where the whole situation started changing. Rick Ross lives a fast-moving lifestyle. Between concerts, business meetings, travel, and appearances, he's constantly on the move. Because of that, there were times when he would leave the Promised Land for a couple of weeks at a time before coming back. And according to Ross, every time he returned, the tiger seemed a little different from the way he remembered it.
I went out of town for 2 weeks, came back, fed the tiger. Noticed the tiger nails were a little sharp.
The first time he came back after being gone for about 2 weeks, he noticed something small but noticeable. The tiger's claws had started growing and sharper. At that point, it wasn't anything extreme yet. The claws were just sharp enough to catch his attention. It was still within that stage where someone might think the situation was manageable if they tried to convince themselves everything was under control. But young big cats grow fast, and while Ross was busy traveling and handling his schedule, the tiger kept developing. Then he left again for another stretch about 2 more weeks away from the property, and when he finally returned to the Promised Land the second time, he immediately realized things had changed in a much bigger way.
Go out of town, come back 2 weeks later, tiger nails are fucking out of control.
Rick Ross later summed it up with 2 simple words: out of control. That's the exact phrase he used when talking about how the tiger had changed. At first, the claws were just getting sharper, something noticeable but not immediately alarming. But after more time passed, the animal had clearly grown stronger and more difficult to manage. And that moment really shows the reality of raising a tiger, even one that starts out small and calm. These animals grow incredibly fast. Their claws get bigger, their teeth develop quickly, and their strength increases every single week. Nature built them to become powerful predators, and that transformation happens much faster than many people expect. If someone doesn't have professional training and the right facilities to handle a growing big cat, the situation can quickly become overwhelming.
Everybody's scared to feed the fucking tiger. Now it's a tiger for real.
That's the point where Ross said it finally hit him. The cub stage was over, now it was truly a tiger. For a short period, tiger cubs can seem manageable. They're smaller, playful, and people sometimes convince themselves it's similar to caring for a large dog. But that stage doesn't last long. Once that window closes, the reality sets in fast. What used to look like a harmless cub becomes a powerful wild animal. And according to Ross, the tiger eventually became so intimidating that people on the property were nervous about even getting close to it, let alone handling daily care like feeding.
It's growing.
It's every time I come back, it's different.
Where's our tiger?
As time passed, the tiger kept growing bigger and stronger. Every time Rick Ross or his team looked at it, the animal seemed a little more powerful and a little less like the small cub that first showed up. The change didn't go unnoticed by the staff working at the Promised Land either. The people helping manage the property were starting to get nervous about dealing with the animal. At first it may have seemed exciting to have a tiger on the estate, but once the claw's size and strength kept increasing, the situation started feeling much more serious. Eventually, nobody wanted to be the person walking up to the enclosure with food anymore. That job suddenly carried a lot more risk than it did in the beginning. That slow realization pushed Ross to the same understanding many people eventually reach when dealing with big cats. No matter how calm they seem at first, a tiger is still a tiger.
And I'm just like, I tried,
And at the center of the story was the fact that the animal originally came from NBA YoungBoy. He was the one who first obtained the tiger. So when the situation became difficult to manage, Ross ended up dealing with the reality of caring for an animal that had started as someone else's decision in the first place. For years, the whole situation involving NBA YoungBoy and the white tiger mostly stayed in the background of hip-hop conversations. People who closely followed the culture remembered the story, and there were still articles online from around 2018 discussing what happened. Screenshots from the original Instagram videos were still floating around too, but even with that, the story never completely dominated the internet for weeks the way some viral controversies do. The incident happened, authorities removed the tiger, and eventually the public conversation cooled down. YoungBoy kept releasing music, fans kept streaming, and the world kept moving forward. Meanwhile, Nola the tiger was living quietly at the Lions, Tigers, and Bears Sanctuary in California, far away from social media drama, far away from headlines, just living her life in a protected environment with trained caretakers. But then something unexpected happened in February 2026, and the entire story suddenly came back into public conversation again. The spark came from a YouTube video. A wildlife expert named Forrest Galante, who has built a large audience through videos about rare and endangered animals, visited the Lions, Tigers, and Bears Sanctuary for a tour. During that walkthrough, the sanctuary staff started telling him about one of the animals living there, Nola. They explained her entire history to him. They talked about where she originally came from, who had owned her before, and the condition she was reportedly in when the sanctuary first received her.
That's Nola.
Okay.
He was a cub pet of a famous YoungBoy rapper in Louisiana.
During the tour, one of the sanctuary staff members introduced Nola right there on camera. Without hesitation, they explained that she had once belonged to a well-known rapper from Louisiana. There was no vague wording or careful phrasing around it. The staff member openly shared the background of how Nola had ended up at the sanctuary, explaining that she had previously been kept as a private pet before being rescued. That moment immediately changed the tone of the conversation around the story.
And he was abusing her horribly. And the authorities saw it because it was posted on social media. Go figure.
Because now the history behind Nola wasn't just something buried in old articles anymore. It was being discussed again in a widely shared video. At one point, the sanctuary staff even made a pointed comment about social media. The remark highlighted how unusual it is when situations involving exotic animals end up documented online for everyone to see. In this case, the videos and posts shared online years earlier had helped reveal the situation publicly. Then Forrest Galante added a remark of his own during the visit, and that line quickly became one of the most quoted moments from the entire video once people started sharing the clip across the internet.
Don't be a rapper, and if you are a rapper, don't get a tiger.
Good idea.
Yeah.
During the video, the conversation also shifted toward a much bigger issue. Forrest Galante explained that the exotic pet trade especially involving big cats and high-profile figures, has been a documented and recurring problem for years. Experts often point out that these animals require extremely specialized care, and many private owners simply don't have the facilities, training, or long-term resources needed to properly raise them. When situations go wrong, it's usually the animals that end up suffering the consequences. That's one reason sanctuaries like lions, tigers, and bears exist in the first place. The staff then began explaining the specific condition Nola was reportedly in when she first arrived at the sanctuary years earlier, and the details they shared lined up closely with what had been reported back in 2018. But hearing those facts spoken directly in a video that was now spreading across the internet gave the story a whole new level of attention.
And so the authorities rescued her, took her to the Audubon Zoo. Parasites so bad, no fur on her face.
One of the most shocking details they mentioned was the parasite problem, which had reportedly become so severe that the young tiger had lost fur across parts of her face. What the sanctuary described wasn't just a small health issue that popped up overnight. According to the staff, the condition Nola arrived in suggested problems that had been building for a long period of time. Parasite infestations that severe usually don't appear instantly.
Pads were roughed up and being kept on cement.
They often develop when an animal goes without proper veterinary care or treatment for an extended stretch.
And so when it was decided she would come here, Bobby did what Bobby does. Team of people set out.
Then there were the other health concerns that had already been documented. The cub had been underweight, her paw pads were worn down, and several signs pointed to an environment that wasn't suited for raising a young tiger. Each detail added another piece to the picture of what Nola's early life had reportedly been like before the rescue happened. Sanctuary staff explained that big cats, especially white tiger cubs, require extremely specialized care. They need proper diets, natural environments to move around in, and consistent veterinary attention as they grow. According to the reports discussed in the video, Nola had instead been dealing with hard flooring under her paws, nutrition problems, and untreated parasites during that early stage of her life. The sanctuary also talked about the complex process that followed once authorities stepped in, removing the cub from Louisiana and safely transporting her across the country to California required careful planning and coordination. When it came time to move Nola out of Louisiana, the operation was anything but simple. Bobby Brink, the founder of Lions, Tigers, and Bears, organized a full team to travel to New Orleans and safely retrieve the cub. The plan involved multiple people, specialized transport equipment, and careful preparation to make sure the young tiger could survive the long journey across the country. Moving a sick and fragile tiger cub is not like transporting a regular animal. Every step has to be controlled and monitored so the animal stays safe during the trip.
Went to New Orleans, picked her up, and then brought Nola back here.
But the moment that really pushed this story back into public attention was the video itself going viral. Once the footage from the sanctuary started spreading online, the entire story suddenly returned to the spotlight again. What had mostly been an old headline from 2017 and 2018 was now blowing up across social media all over again. People who had never even heard of Nola before were suddenly discovering the entire situation for the first time. And this time around, the conversation online was even more intense than it had been years earlier. That's why it's important to separate what was reported back then from what people are saying now, because there's a real difference between those two things. When the story first surfaced back in 2018, local outlets like WAFB and NOLA.com mainly focused on the legal side of the situation. Reports explained that a white tiger cub had been found at a private residence without the permits required under Louisiana law. Authorities also noted that the cub appeared to be in poor condition consistent with neglect, which is why the animal was removed and transferred to professionals for care. However, those early reports did not officially confirm NBA YoungBoy by name as the legal owner of the tiger. Instead, coverage pointed out that social media posts from a rapper had shown a white tiger cub with markings that appeared to match the rescued animal. The wording used in the media back in 2018 was much more careful and measured. Reports focused on what authorities found, what the animal's condition appeared to show, and what the available evidence pointed toward at the time. But one word that was not widely used in those early reports was abuse. That stronger label became much more common later, especially in statements coming from Lions, Tigers, and Bears, the sanctuary that has cared for Nola ever since her rescue. In recent months, the sanctuary has spoken much more directly about what they believe happened. In social media posts from around December 2025, In January 2026, the sanctuary said Nola had been kept as an illegal pet by a famous rapper in Louisiana. The sanctuary also made a much more serious public allegation, stating that videos had been posted showing the tiger being hit. That claim came directly from the sanctuary's own social media page, and it immediately raised the temperature around the entire story. But this is also where the situation gets more complicated. There is a real difference between what the sanctuary is alleging now and what the earliest news reports officially confirmed back when the seizure happened, and that gap matters, because while Nola's condition at the time absolutely pointed to serious mistreatment and neglect, the newer claims coming from the sanctuary go beyond the narrower language used in the original coverage. That's why this part of the story has become so charged. People are now comparing old reporting, newer statements, and public reaction all at once, and the conversation has gotten much more intense because of it. Back when the story first appeared in 2018, most of the news coverage focused on the legal issues surrounding the tiger's seizure. Reports explained that authorities removed the animal because it was being kept without the permits required under Louisiana law, and they also noted that the cub appeared to be in poor condition consistent with neglect. However, those early reports did not officially name NBA YoungBoy as the confirmed owner, and they also did not include allegations of direct physical violence at that time. YoungBoy himself later referenced the situation in his own music. In his 2018 track Outside Today, he rapped, "I just got a pet monkey, cashed out on a tiger but really don't want it. My son don't like him." That lyric stood out to many listeners because it openly acknowledged that he had purchased a tiger. Saying he cashed out suggested he had spent a significant amount of money to acquire the animal. The second part of the line added another interesting detail. When he said he didn't really want the tiger and that his son didn't like it either, it gave the impression that the situation may not have turned out the way he expected. To some people, that lyric sounded like someone realizing that owning an exotic animal was far more complicated than it seemed at first. From a legal standpoint, the case itself was handled primarily as a wildlife violation involving the private possession of a tiger without the required permits. When it comes to the legal side of this case, there's another important detail. Public records do not show any criminal animal cruelty charges filed against NBA YoungBoy related to this situation. None on the books. The legal action that did happen was handled as a wildlife and permitting violation, meaning the issue centered on the illegal possession of a tiger without the proper authorization required by state law. In other words, the case was treated as a regulatory matter rather than a criminal animal cruelty prosecution. There could be several reasons for that. Outcome: sometimes it's because the available evidence does not meet the legal threshold required for criminal charges. Other times, authorities focus on the violation that is easiest to enforce under existing wildlife laws. Whatever the reasoning behind it, the result was the same. The consequences tied to the situation focused on the illegal possession of the animal, rather than criminal cruelty charges. Another interesting part of this story is the public response, or lack of one, both when the tiger was first seized back in 2017 and now that the story has resurfaced again in 2026. There has been no widely documented public statement from YoungBoy addressing the situation, no detailed denial, no confirmation, no major public explanation about the tiger or the allegations surrounding it. There also haven't been widely reported legal actions aimed at stopping the sanctuary from discussing the story publicly. At least based on currently available reporting, no cease and desist letters or lawsuits connected to these claims have surfaced publicly. So for years, the situation has mostly been met with silence, and that silence has been interpreted in very different ways depending on who you ask. Some people online believe the lack of response raises questions. They argue that if the claims were completely false, a public figure might try to push back or defend their reputation. Others say the silence fits YoungBoy's long-standing approach to controversy. Throughout his career, he has often avoided addressing public narratives directly, choosing instead to focus on releasing music and staying out of media debates. In that view, ignoring the noise and letting the conversation fade on its own is simply how he has always handled situations like this. Since the story resurfaced again, public reaction has been completely split. Different people are looking at the situation from very different angles. Some fans defend YoungBoy by pointing out how young he was at the time. Back in 2017, he was only 18 years old, and his career had exploded almost overnight. Money, fame, and attention were hitting him fast, and a lot of people argue that he was still figuring out how to handle all of it. From that perspective, buying a tiger looked more like a reckless status move than anything else. A flashy purchase meant to show success on social media. People in this camp believe the problems that followed were the result of someone being completely out of their depth, Taking care of a tiger requires specialized knowledge, and most teenagers wouldn't have any idea how to manage that responsibility. But there's another side to the debate that feels very different. Critics point to the reported condition Nola was in when she was rescued. They argue that the level of health problems described by veterinarians suggests something more serious than simply being inexperienced. For example, parasite infestations severe enough to cause major fur loss usually develop over time. Situations like that typically build up gradually rather than appearing overnight. Health issues like that don't appear overnight. Malnutrition doesn't happen over a single weekend, and damaged paw pads from walking on hard cement usually point to an environment that stayed that way for a long stretch of time. According to the sanctuary, those details showed the cub had been living in conditions that weren't suited for a young tiger. They also made the serious claim that videos had once been posted showing the animal being hit. If something like that were proven, it would suggest behavior far beyond simply not understanding how to care for an exotic animal. That's why the debate around this story is still going strong. So what do you think? Was this situation blown out of proportion by the internet? Or did NBA YoungBoy really cross a line with the way this tiger was handled? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives like this, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who follows hip-hop stories like this. Don't forget to check out the next video on your screen for another wild breakdown.